Happy Sabbath. I was in San Antonio last month, and I know I was speaking today. The weather out there was about 105 degrees every day. So I was thinking, how can I kill two birds with one stone? So I went to the bookstore. I'm like, okay, let's take a different look at the Day of Atonement. Let's see what's out there. I wasn't sure which aspect I wanted to speak about because there's several different things that today represents. But I only have time for one. So the first book I picked up was on fasting, about 100 pages. And they were talking about fasting for 2, 3, and 4 weeks at a time. And I'm thinking, wow, I'm a wimp, you know. I fasted for 3 days once, and that was it for me. That was it. But as I read the book more, you know, their version of fasting, they still have to drink 2 liters of water a day, vegetable broth, you know, some other stuff. So it's not the fasting, the afflict your souls like we're doing today. The second book I picked up was called Yom Kippur Inspirational Readings. It was about 350 pages, and basically they were sermon snippets from about 200 different rabbis explaining how the Jews look at today. And let me tell you, that was very tough reading. That was very tough reading. I thought I would really, you know, dig deeper, and it just didn't seem to be the case. It was more oral traditions than it was biblical references. So that was kind of a shock to me. So then I went to the Bible commentaries, Christian Bible commentaries. I wanted to see how they interpreted the symbolism of the Old Testament. And, you know, they know that the first goat that's sacrificed for sin, they understand that that represents Christ. The second goat, the scapegoat, they have no clue. They make up these elaborate reasonings without looking at the Bible for an explanation. And then finally I went to, you know, the real source, Wikipedia, and tried to figure out what they had to say. You know, at the end of this, something became very, very clear to me. One is there's a lot of confusion out there. But that also gave me my topic for today. Since God is not the author of confusion, where does all this come from? You know, if you're just someone on the street and you wanted to know what Yom Kippur or the Day of Atonement was about, and you went to any of these experts, and everyone I went to was an expert in their field. We have a lot of experts and a lot of knowledge and very little truth. There's no way you can figure this out without God's Spirit. You're just not going to find it. So that's why I wanted to focus today on what the world calls the scapegoat, but is properly called the Azazel goat. Scapegoat really came from the word escapegoat because it was sent away alive. But we take the word scapegoat more to mean someone who bears the blame for something they didn't do, which is not the proper translation, which is why so many people are confused. So I just want to focus on one of the goats today. So I'd like to start in Leviticus 16, verse 7. Leviticus 16 is, the entire chapter is devoted to the Day of Atonement, but I want to just focus on the verses that deal with the Azazel goat, which I'm going to slay that name before this is over, because it looks like a long A to me, but they say it should be a short A, so I know I'm going to mess it up. Leviticus 16, starting in verse 7. He, speaking of Aaron, shall take the 2 goats and present them before the Lord at the door of the tabernacle of meeting. Then Aaron shall cast lots for the 2 goats, one for the Lord, and the other lot for the Azazel. And Aaron shall bring the goat on which the Lord's lot fell, and offer it as a sin offering. But the goat on which the lot fell to be the Azazel shall be presented alive before the Lord to make atonement upon it, and to let it go as the scapegoat into the wilderness. So now drop down to verse 20. And it picks up the story again regarding the 2 goats. Leviticus 16, verse 20. And when he has made an end of atoning for the holy place, the tabernacle of meeting, and the altar, he shall bring the live goat. And Aaron shall lay both his hands on the head of the live goat, confess over it all the iniquities of the children of Israel, and all their transgressions concerning all their sins, putting them on the head of the goat, and shall send it away into the wilderness by the hand of a suitable man. The goat shall bear on itself all their iniquities to an uninhabited land, and he shall release the goat in the wilderness. 4 times in those last 3 verses, the word all is used. It's very complete. All sin, all iniquity, all transgressions. While people sin and can repent, while nations can sin and repent, this is not talking about a specific incident. This is talking about a cause, not an effect. Since God is not the author of confusion, and we do reap what we sow, there's got to be a cause for this effect. So what I want to do is jump right into what the Christian commentaries seem to not be able to find. Since these are symbolisms, and they point to events that will be fulfilled, I want to go to the book of Revelation and show what Christ has to say about these events being fulfilled. So if we go to Revelation 20, starting in verse 1, we will find these symbolisms explained. Revelation 20, verses 1 through 3. To me and you, we look at this and it seems pretty straightforward. And we wonder why other people can't see it. And as I was writing this, I still wonder that. But I know the answer. Revelation 20, verse 1. Then I saw an angel coming down from heaven, having the key to the bottomless pit, or abyss, and a great chain in his hand. He laid hold of the dragon, that serpent of old, who was the devil and Satan, just to make sure we've covered all of his names and we don't want to leave anything out, and bound him for 1,000 years. And he cast him into the bottomless pit and shut him up and set a seal on him, so that he should deceive the nations no more till the 1,000 years were finished. But after these things he must be released for a little while. You know, even professing Christians today, over 1 billion of them, about 35% do not believe in the devil or that he has any influence. And yet, if you look at God's plan of salvation, there is a day specifically which identifies him and identifies what has to happen. You know, back in the Garden of Eden, we had a choice, and we made the wrong choice. As we move forward in God's plan, something else is going to happen. We know that this world will be destroyed. Mankind will be shaken to the very foundation. There's a reason for that. When Satan's not kicking up his heels, we don't really pay attention to him. You know, in our booklet talking about Is the Devil Real, we talked about 150 million people dying in World War I and World War II. 150 million people, and that massive death causes people to lose faith in God. How could a loving God allow that to happen? If you look at the Earth's population today and the first 4 seals alone of Revelation, you're talking 1.5 billion. 10 times worse than World War I and II combined. If you think that the previous 2 world wars have had an effect on Christianity and faith, we haven't seen anything yet. And there is one being responsible for that, at the very heart of it, and God calls it for what it is. So the last point I wanted to make today, normally about this time of year we notice that trials increase. I mean, it's happened to me, it's happened to people I know, and Satan understands what's going to happen. He won't agree to it. He's going to try everything to stop it, but in the end, he knows he's going to lose. He's already tried to take over heaven once. That didn't work. So we know he gets upset. But there were 2 other reasons that occurred to me that he probably gets more upset this time of year that I hadn't really thought about before. In Leviticus 16, today is the only day that the Holy of Holies was entered, where the Ark of the Covenant was. And we know on top of the Ark of the Covenant is the mercy seat with 2 cherubs, or the cherubim with their wings folding over each other. I I want you to go to Ezekiel 28, verse 16, real quick. Ezekiel 28, verse 16 tells us something that we probably know of, but I never thought about it for today. Ezekiel 28 and verse 16. Initially, this is talking about the king of Tyre, but then it breaks into the symmetry of Lucifer before he fell. Verse 16, by the abundance of your trading you became filled with violence within, and you sinned. Therefore I cast you as a profane thing out of the mountain of God, and I destroyed you, O covering cherub, from the midst of the fiery stones. So what Ezekiel's telling us is Lucifer, before his rebellion, was one of the covering cherubs over God's throne room. You think that when he sees the mercy seat that he remembers what he was like before and how far he's fallen? I think that's really got to hurt. On top of that, there is another event yet unfulfilled but will be fulfilled before Satan is thrown into the abyss, and it has to do with the Feast of Trumpets. We know in the plan of God that Christ has to return at trumpets 10 days ago. But nowhere did God have to have the first resurrection at trumpets. We know that he does, but he didn't have to. So Satan, for 6,000 years, has been working very hard to separate man from God. And today, when we talk about atonement and we talk about reconciliation, not like the Passover for the first fruits, but for the rest of mankind. This is where Satan has really tried to get between God and man. The first resurrection happens for those who are faithful, who were baptized, who overcame and endured, standing at the right hand of Christ, immortal. Satan gets to witness that. Everything he's been convincing the demons of, we can do this, stick with me. It all goes out the window very quickly. And so there's a lot of reason for him to be upset. But at the same time, it's a time for us to rejoice. I know we're fasting today and we are humbling ourselves, but as Psalm says, God's people are volunteers. The atonement and the reconciliation has more to do with the feast than we really understand. Why would God rebuild the earth if Satan was still around? He's going to put it back to a state like the Garden of Eden. If you think about this, there's a deliberate pause between trumpets, atonement, and the feast. And we're all looking forward to the feast. We're ready in fulfillment to roll up our sleeves and to move forward. However, why would God do that with Satan still around? There's an important step that he has to be put away so that he can't do what he did before. That is what the reconciliation and the Azazel Goat really represent. Have a happy feast.